This is One on One. One on One is pleased to welcome Captain Jonathan Boulware, who is the president and CEO of South Street Seaport Museum. How you doing?
I'm great. It's good to be here.
Let's get this out of the way right away. I said, Captain.
Yeah, captain.
Explain it.
Well, I'm a sailing ship captain. I actually licensed for all kinds of things, but my background is in traditional sailing ships, which in the modern world mostly carry students, and that's what my background is. And my dad was a captain before me, also of sailing ships. So in that way, I'm a little bit of an oddity. But what's more odd about it is that in New York 100 years ago, from where we're sitting right now, you could hit 10 captains with a biscuit, right?
Now?
Now, very few, right? There are those on the ferries and those on the commercial waterways. The port has mostly moved over toward New Jersey, and people are less aware of it. But New York is what it is because it was a port, and it's still a port.
Port City.
Yeah, Port City, the Port City, frankly.
The.
Yeah, well, you know, it's New York. It's the greatest city in the world.
I appreciate. I'm from Jersey, but I appreciate being here.
Yeah.
Because this is where it's happening. But I'm curious about this, the museum.
Yeah.
Talk about it.
So the museum is a bit of preserved New York, and we're actually place-based. Place matters for what we do, and in fact, where we are is the original port of New York. It's the place where Dutch New Amsterdam became New York City. And when you think about the kind of iconic phrases of New York, you think about the identity of New York, most of those identities that people think of are actually vested in the original port itself. So think of a phrase that typifies New York.
Because now I'm the city that never sleeps.
Perfect. First 24-hour district, right down there on the Street of Ships between the Battery and the Brooklyn Bridge. Think of another one.
New York, New York.
Okay, if I can make it there, I'll make it anywhere. There is the business of the port. That's what actually drove to Wall Street. All this stuff up here, like Times Square and Fifth Avenue, everything, was a growth northward from the original city. Down below Wall Street, which had a wall on it originally when it was Dutch New Amsterdam. But when you think about all of the things that typify New York, the city that never sleeps, or if I can make it there, I'll make it anywhere, those are actually the enthusiasm and the ambition that was really vested in the original port of New York. And so at the museum, we tell that story in ships that represent the original ships, in piers that represent the original piers, and in fact, in the original fabric in the buildings. Right central to what we do is in Schermerhorn Row. So Schermerhorn Row is a building.
Right.
It was, when it was completed in 1812, the largest building in the city of New York after City Hall. It's only 6 stories tall. It was basically the skyscraper of its day. So Schermerhorn, Dutch word, right? Dutch name. That was the guy who had it built, right? Was a descendant of the original Dutch immigrants. And in many ways, it's the first World Trade Center of the city of New York. It's the place it was a building that was built entirely for mercantile purposes. And it was built speculatively, meaning that there wasn't actually a business model for it yet. So all of this is an indication, architecturally, you can see it in the building, architecturally, that it is the ambition and the excitement of 19th century New York.
When and how did you become so fascinated by everything you've just described?
Well, it's been a long process, but if I look at particular moments, in 1992, when I was 19 or 20 years old, I came here in a square-rigged sailing ship. We tied up at the piers of South Street. I saw the Fulton Fish Market for the first time, which I saw at 4 in the morning, not because I got up at 4 in the morning, but because I'd been up from the night before, because that's what sailors do. You come into port and you've been at sea for a bunch of time. But I went ashore with my shipmates and I went to the Seaport Museum, which was thriving at the time. I got to walk around downtown, where in those years, you know, you'll remember they rolled up the carpets and rolled up the sidewalks at the end of the day. But I got to see a piece of old New York in that, and many years later, 2011, I got the chance to come back here, and I've been a student of this ever since. But I would also I've become a lover of New York to the point where I realized I've always been a New Yorker and I didn't know it.
What does that mean?
Well, E.B. White famously, in his book Here is New York, describes three New Yorks, right? The New York of the commuter, the New York of the born and bred New Yorker, and the New York of the transplant. And one of the ways that I see that is that it's hard to love New York as much as the transplant does, right? Like, native New Yorkers look at it with the sort of, you know, realistic eye. They see it for the totality. But people like me, you know, I've only been here 7 years, and I love it like it's been home my whole life.
That's awesome. We're going to keep showing some more pictures. I'm curious about this. Some of the ships.
Yeah.
Describe what people are going to see.
Well, so we've actually, for people who know our museum over time, we actually have a smaller fleet of ships than we used to, and that's a really important advancement for the museum. We've brought the fleet of ships down in size to something that's really manageable, but more importantly, we've really refined it to be able to tell our story. So we have 5 historic ships now. One, a big square-rigged ship, the very type of ship in the age of sail that was bringing goods in and goods out, people in and people out of New York. So a port basically is a breakpoint in transportation, and that breakpoint in transportation gives you finance and banking and printing. It gives you all of the industries that break up around that. So, you know, hotels and chandlers and brothels and you name it, all the things that spring up around a port. And it gets big enough, it becomes a city. If it gets bigger than that, it becomes a metropolis. So every port has the shipping piers and the shipping business, and it also has the finance and the trade. It so happens that our financial district is the financial capital of the world. So when I think about the story of the South Street Seaport, it's a story of city significance, it's a story of state significance, of national significance. It's a global story, really. And so just that ship that I'm describing, the ship Wavertree, is an English ship. That's the vector, that's the connector, the instrument of globalization, the way that New York connected people and ideas and commerce with the rest of the world.
Post 9/11, what changed down there?
We were devastated. I mean, that was a devastating event in 1,000 ways. For the museum, it meant we were effectively closed for a couple of years. And when we look at that, followed by the 2008 financial crisis, followed by Sandy, which flooded us, it is, I hesitate to say miraculous, but it is really, really
miraculous.
Striking that we are still alive and, in fact, growing. And what I think where I point to for why that's so is that there are many, many passionate people, I am but one of them, who care so much about this museum and the importance of it to the city, in elected office, in the community, donors and friends who've been around for a long time. People really care about the South Street Seaport Museum.
Well done, Captain. By the way, the South Street Seaport Museum is at 12 Fulton Street in downtown. Thank you so much.
You're welcome. Great to have you here. Thank you so much.
I learned a lot.
One-on-One with Steve Adubato has been a production of the Caucus Educational Corporation, celebrating over 30 years of broadcast excellence. This special edition of One-on-One with Steve Adubato is brought to you from the Tisch WNET studios at Lincoln Center. Funding has been provided by Hackensack Meridian Health, the Port Authority of New York and New Jersey, TD Bank, New Jersey Resources, Fedway Associates, the Fidelco Group, and by Kessler Foundation. Transportation provided by Airbrook Limousine, serving the metropolitan New York, New Jersey area.